All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. This is NewsRadio WRVA. My name is Rich Herrera. Thank you so much for joining us. It is time for us to once again catch up with our former governor, our former senator, the one, the only George Allen, joining us here on NewsRadio WRVA. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, Rich, and all your listeners.
All right, it's on.
Let me
sir.
make one real quick point after Gary Hess. I was listening to his views, and the salary increases for teachers and state employees and all that. No one will get as big an increase as what the Democrats are proposing for state legislators themselves. All right, on to other subjects. Just a comment on that. No one will get an increase as much as they want to give themselves.
Senator, I don't know if that's really fair because the governor ran on a platform and she was going to lower the cost of living for all of us here in this Commonwealth. They were going to worry about everyday things. They're going to worry about making our lives more affordable. Instead, I see the legislators, their lives going to get more affordable because they're getting this huge pay raise.
Yeah, most of what they're doing. There's one good thing as far as energy that they're passing, and it's going to have data centers paying more of the power bills as opposed to residential, and that will be a little bit of relief for residential. Meanwhile, though, on the other hand, they're joining that regressive greenhouse gas initiative, a carbon tax with these loser high cost northeastern states. That's going to raise power bills. They got all sorts of other things that are going to increase the power bills that will be a net increase in that. And then on the data centers, it's a question of whether data centers will continue. And people pay data centers these days, apparently. But, some of the things they're imposing on that could have an effect on Virginia being a desirable place for data centers. And I understand how they ought to be put in near power plants, and they ought to be in industrial parks, not next to battlefields, historic sites, or residential areas. But some of the things that they're doing may make Virginia less desirable for it. And then, of course, their priority for this whole session was to spend over $5 million to jerry-rig elections so that the Democrats control 91% of the state as far as congressional representation, and the Republicans are allocated 9% representation out of Virginia in the
Okay, can I stop you right there, sir?
Yeah.
When in the world did we agree that Don Scott, Louise Lucas, and the Democrats get to allocate who represents the people of this Commonwealth? I didn't. I'm not saying anybody's allowed to allocate my voice. I pay my taxes. I get to decide who I send to Washington, D.C. No one's supposed to allocate who represents me, sir.
You're treated like a vassal by these folks. And if you live in the outer suburbs in the Commonwealth of Virginia or rural areas, your voice will be subsumed by urban areas, primarily Northern Virginia. We talked in the beginning on these maps where Goochland and Powhatan are going to be represented. The same with Hanover and New Kent County and Louisa. Much of the listening area is going to be represented by someone in Northern Virginia. In fact, it's been said that within a 5-mile radius, they'll have 5 members of Congress. And they're taking large swaths of the Shenandoah Valley, the rural small town communities, the Piedmont, the Northern Neck, the Middle Peninsula, the Upper Peninsula, the Richmond suburbs, and their voices are in effect silenced because there'll be a small minority of the vote in these far-flung jerry-rigged districts. And it's as you know, I'm with a group called No Gerrymandering Virginia. We're bipartisan, and our view is the maps that we have now, the districts we have now, they're very fair, and we're protecting honest representative democracy in the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of our country.
Sir, we had Brian Cannon. We had Brian Cannon on the program a couple days ago, someone you know very well, a Democrat, and I pointed this out to him. We're going to have 10 districts that will be solely represented by Democrats. I find that offensive. But if I'm
unrepresentative of Virginia, it'd be one thing if it's 6'5" or 7'4". You can say, well, that's roughly what Virginia should be, but it's not 10-1. We're not.
But I also find it, sir. I find it disgusting that there's someone who lives out in the southwest part of Virginia that is a Democrat, that his voice isn't going to matter as well. So we keep worrying about, they're going to go 10-1. What about that Democrat that lives out there near the border of Tennessee? They're also telling him he doesn't have a voice because they fixed that district no matter what. That'll never be a contested seat. So basically, the Republicans, and there are Democrats that are being disenfranchised. And again, I say this, I pay my taxes, I want my representation. I'm going to be taxed without representation, and so is that Democrat sitting over there in Lynchburg.
Let's look at that, Rich. The requirements in the Constitution are you want compact, contiguous districts with communities of similar interest, and that's what's the latter part. They're obviously not compact districts. These things look like scorpions and worms and salamanders and lobsters and all the rest. So they're not compact. They are contiguous, tenuously. But the worst part is they're not communities of similar interest. The communities in Southwest Virginia, from the Cumberland Gap to the Coalfields to the Interstate 81 corridor part, those are communities of similar interest, as are all the communities up and down the Shenandoah Valley, as are those on the Northern Neck and the Middle Peninsula and Southside Virginia. What they've done is they've taken these rural, small-town communities and lumped them in with densely populated urban areas that are not communities of similar interest. They don't have the same culture, the same views, and so forth. So there are Republicans, there may only be a quarter of them, in Alexandria, Virginia. But Alexandria and Fairfax and Arlington and Prince William and Loudoun County, those are communities of similar interests, and that's where you want districts that have those similar interests. And this is the greatest aggravation to me, is that and this is why you're getting some of these rural counties, Augusta, Rockingham, Washington County, which is Abingdon near Bristol in Tennessee. They're passing resolutions against this because they think that their interest and their concerns will be completely ignored if it gets dominated by these urban districts and urban interests. And so that's the biggest thing. There's always going to be no place votes 100% one way or the other, but the communities in which they reside ought to be kept together so that those interests combined have a good influence.
Sir, I'm going to have to disagree with you for just a moment.
Okay, fair enough.
There are some places where they do vote in lockstep 100%, 98%. North Korea is one.
Yeah, well, but no place in Virginia votes not. They may get some places that get in the 70s and 80%, but still.
But my point is, in North Korea, you don't have a choice. It's already predetermined who's going to win. They're doing the same thing over here. I mean, maybe not to that extreme, but is the results going to be any different if 98% of them will vote for the dear leader and he stays in office forever and they call it fair elections? Here, I'm going to have a 10-1 map where I've guaranteed Helmer and all the rest of these are going to be guaranteed their seats, and there's going to be one guaranteed Republican seat. What's the difference?
That's a good point. I would not say they're as bad as North Korea because there are two parties, but what they're doing is rigging elections. I mean, this is not representative democracy. This is a power grab. And to me, it's unseemly. I think it's unconstitutional the way that they've done it. And by the way, when people were voting last November, there wasn't a single person, statewide office or for delegate, who was saying, hey, elect me. We're going to rig elections so it ends up being 10-1 Democrats. And all y'all who live in rural areas, you'll be really happy to be represented by people who live inside the Beltway who couldn't care less about agriculture, about farming, about forestry. small towns and the challenges in rural areas and outer suburbs.
Well, that's the tell,
no
sir.
one was saying it, and so this is dishonest.
Is the
in
day
so
is
many
long.
respects?
Well,
Yeah,
that's the tell. This is not. Hey, if you really believed on it, run on it. But once you get the governor's mansion, the House, and the Senate, now you're just trying to protect power. That's the big difference. If you would have come out and voted and ran on that, great. Abigail Spanberger, if you said, hey, listen, I support this, I'd have something to think about when I went to the ballot box. None of you did that. That's how you could tell this is a power grab. This is a power play because you're doing it after the fact. You didn't come out and tell us beforehand. That's what offends me.
And they did it in the midst of the election. In Virginia, we have an election season, not an election day. It goes on for 45 days. And when they passed it, it was less than a week before the November final day of voting. And it really is violating the Virginia Constitution. I'm dismayed by the Supreme Court of Virginia saying, well, we're not going to rule on this until after the voters vote. And hopefully, we the people will be able to vote this down, and then the Supreme Court will say the case is moot. If this is a close vote, I don't care what the vote is. They have clearly violated the Constitution and the laws in the way that this constitutional amendment to allow this jerry-rigging or gerrymandering to occur. And we'll see what happens, but it's up to us, the people, and it has to be a vassal uprising because the Democrats have now, national Democrats have poured in over $21 million into these deceptive ads. And we're fighting as best we can in a lot of different groups. There's Ben Klein, the congressman from over across the Blue Ridge in the 6th district, is trying to get a ground game going with it. There's a Republican group, and then there's our bipartisan group. And I think it's more and more people realize what they're trying to perpetrate and impose on the people of Virginia and disenfranchising them and taking away fair representation. I think there's a good chance that we can defeat it, but it takes an informed and actually voting public. And in fact, voting starts today.
Starts today.
It starts today. And if you vote early, I'm going to have to vote early because I'm chair of the Reagan Range Board of Governors, and we have our annual meeting on exactly April 21st out in Santa Barbara County. So I got to be out there. So Susan and I will be voting no, heck no, early.
I will as well. We're going to Ireland taking WRVA listeners, so I'm going to vote early as well. You're darn right I will. Governor, I got to run. Thank you so much. Give my best to your wife, the most graceful person I've ever met in my entire life. And make sure you tell her I said that because she's one of my favorites.
I'll tell her I agreed with Rich. We just talked about how graceful and wonderful you are. And she is a wonderful wife, a wonderful nurse, a wonderful mother, a wonderful daughter and sister to everyone who's blessed to have her in their families.
Listen, I like you a lot. You know how much I like your family. I still think you outkicked your coverage.
Oh, no question about it. No dispute. I agree. Again.
There you go. All right, Governor, I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
All right, Rich. Adios.
Adios. Governor George Allen joining us here on News Radio WRVA. I'm not kidding. First time I met her, I didn't know who she was. I just looked at her like, she looks like Grace Kelly. She's so graceful. I mean, she was something regal about her. And then Governor Allen's looking for someone to hold his soda. We hadn't met face to face. We just talked on the radio. And he handed me a soda can that she took from him. Like, oh, they're together. Oh, he really outkicked his coverage. Susan Allen is the light.